Welcome to Health Impacts of Portland's Gas February 2025 update. My name is Lisa Adams, and I'm filling in for Lynn Blacksley this evening. We are members of TERRE's Health Committee, TERRE standing for Toronto East Residents for Renewable Energy. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we participate in this meeting from the traditional territories of many nations, including the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. I further acknowledge the stewardship that Indigenous peoples have provided this land since time immemorial, and the ongoing fight of many Indigenous communities to protect their lands, waters, and air threatened by toxic pollution and the impacts of climate change. Indigenous knowledge keepers pass on and share an understanding of the land that calls on us to treat its plants, animals, and people with honor and respect. We value this knowledge as we learn and work together this evening to help steward and protect Mother Earth. Again, welcome. This is the agenda that we'll be following this evening. David Robertson will talk about the Ford government's energy plans and provide some background context. Then Kyle will talk about how TERRE is responding to some of these issues. And then we will show a video of Dr. Millie Roy. We will then follow with a question and answer session. The video and slides will be made available to you. A little housekeeping. During the presentation, please put questions in the chat and we will address them during the Q&A. During the Q&A, you can either wave digitally or with your actual hand, and we will make sure to get your question. Please stay mute while the presentation is going on. David, tell us about the Ford government's energy plans.
Okay, thanks for that. Give me a minute to share my screen. President Trump has declared war on the climate. And as a consequence of that, as a consequence of gutting climate programs and climate policies in Washington, I think there is a renewed importance of climate action at the local level and, in Canada's case, at the provincial level. And this is where TERRE is situated. TERRE has two broad brush commitments. One is our opposition to the Portland gas plant, and the other is our commitment to clean, cheap, and safe renewable energy. A reminder, the Portland gas plant has a contract that will last until 2034, and everything that Ford is doing suggests its life is going to be much longer than that. And currently, it has an expansion plan to increase its capacity by about 10%. Our goal is to phase out the Portland gas plant by 2030. Our campaign initially and is still focused on getting a full environmental review triggered by the proposed expansion. But as campaigns develop, they lead to additional actions and additional activities. For TERRE, that has meant more concern and more attention on the health risks associated with gas-fired electricity plants. And those health concerns, in turn, have now led to more involvement with the McCleary District and other waterfront developments. How do you build new neighborhoods on the waterfront in the shadow of a gas plant? When the Portland gas plant issued its revised screening report, we responded with more analysis and a renewed demand for a full environmental review. The government is still silent on our concerns, around air quality and health risks. Later this evening, we will focus more on those health risks. But for now, my task is to provide some context for the other issues that TERRE has addressed, such as Bill 214, the misnamed Affordable Energy Act, or the cynical consultation on fossil gas that was held over Christmas, or the government's distorted energy vision. All of those issues that speak directly to the Ford government's energy plans. The Ford government has given a big yes to the energy list on the left of the screen, while it has shoved wind and solar to the sidelines. So when a government sets an energy direction that is at odds with common sense, is at odds with the global clean energy transition, at odds with the urgent need to respond to climate breakdown, as well as the fiduciary obligations of public officials, what do you call it? Ontario's energy policy has been captured by Enbridge Gas and by the nuclear industry. As a result, renewable energy is being squeezed out. And that leads to a number of worrying developments. In the last number of months, what we have seen is that the Ford government's commitment to fossil gas has actually firmed up. They have decided that nuclear is the baseload touchstone of electrification. And those who oppose the direction, those who support renewable energy are now branded, this is a quote, as ideologues who want to, quote, romanticize certain resources. That's from our Minister of Energy. And fourth, the integral link between energy and the climate has been severed. According to the Ford government, energy will be the cornerstone of the province's economic strategy and success. In October, the Ford government released its energy vision statement. It's called Ontario's Affordable Energy Future, the pressing case for more power. Now, all of us in this room, I think, would agree that the energy transition and climate stability are closely linked. But in the 37 pages of the government's energy vision, the word climate appeared only once. In fact, Ontario is a climate outlier. Instead of a renewable energy transition, decarbonizing the economy, linking energy with climate targets and emission reductions, we get a pro-growth agenda, euphemisms like technology agnostic, and the quest from the government to become an energy superpower. This is a snapshot of Ontario's energy use. 21% is electricity, some of that is fossil gas. 39% is fossil gas directly, and 40% is oil. Most of Ontario's energy use is oil and gas. And Enbridge is responsible for bringing most of this oil and gas to Ontario. That's how it makes its money. The scale of this map is small, but the light brown that you see are the oil pipelines in North America that Enbridge has. The blue are the gas pipelines. The broader swaths of yellow in Ontario show the control Enbridge has of gas distribution. Enbridge has over 200,000 kilometers of pipelines, transmission lines, and service lines. And every day, all of those kilometers are full of climate-wrecking crude oil and methane. Enbridge is actually now afraid that its days may be numbered, that those pipelines become stranded assets. So it has mounted a major offensive. It is arguing for what it calls in Ontario a diversified system. That is, fossil gas and electricity. It is forcefully making the claim that its so-called, and this is what it calls it, its pipes and wires is the best energy pathway. And it has been incredibly successful. Whether we're talking about generating electricity, residential heating, or industrial uses, Enbridge has the Ford government on side. This is a busy slide. It's meant to simply convey the many ways the Ford government has acted on behalf of Enbridge. I'm going to focus very briefly on some of the highlighted ones. I'll start with the gas plant expansions. In 2013, gas-fired electricity accounted for 4% of Ontario's electricity. 2023, that had jumped to 13%. Now the plan is 18% by 2030 and 27% by 2040. As the world moves away from fossil gas, we're increasing its use in our electrical supply. Now, the argument used to be that we needed gas plants to phase out coal. Then the argument was that we needed gas plants while nuclear plants were being refurbished. Now, fossil gas has become a long-term commitment. These are some quotes that I've taken from the government's vision statement. I want you to listen to the language that's used. Natural gas is a vital component of Ontario's energy mix. Or this one. It is also a critical component of the province's electricity generation. And finally, there is a need for an economically viable natural gas network to drive economic growth, to maintain customer choice. We're locking our future into gas plants and pipes. There used to be no debate. The issue about decarbonization was accepted. The question was when. So to decarbonize the economy, we knew we needed to phase out gas plants, and the debate was when? 2030, 2035, 2040, not until 2050. Now, instead of pathways to decarbonization, we have pipelines to the future. The Ontario government held a public consultation on gas over the holiday season. Quite cynically, it held the hearings over the holiday. But this is how it described that consultation. Quote, "It was a consultation to support the important role for natural gas in Ontario's energy system and economy. Not whether we should have gas, but what its important role is." Even though it was over Christmas, TERRE responded. And in our submission, we said this, that fossil gas should play a minimal role in the power system and should be phased out quickly through greater use of renewable energy sources, conservation, energy efficiency, and storage. On our website, we describe TERRE, and one of the ways we describe TERRE is with this quote, "We are committed to supporting a rapid, just transition to renewable energy in Toronto and across the province." That point was reinforced in our brief on 214, where we said this, "The proposed legislative amendments would cement an energy future for Ontario that undermines the vast potential of renewable energy." Stephen Lecce became the Minister of Energy in June 2024. At the time, the Independent Electricity Systems Operator, the IESO, was proposing a renewable energy procurement. The minister turned that around. Rather than renewable energy, the procurement now had to become, quote, "technology agnostic." This chart shows our electricity generation by fuel type. You can see how small a role solar and wind play. In fact, solar is 1/2 of 1%. The big brown swath that you see on the screen is nuclear, and that's the swath that's going to get bigger. Shortly after being appointed, Minister Lecce went to the States where he made a pitch to Western leaders and industry movers and shakers. He told them that Ontario is building a blueprint for a nuclear energy future. A CP Wire story put it this way, quote, Ontario is selling itself as the nuclear North Star to guide the direction of American power. The government's vision statement, which I referred to earlier, reinforces the point that we are slated for a nuclear future. It says this, Ontario's nuclear leadership in small modular reactors and large-scale nuclear could continue to create, quote, new export opportunities to drive economic growth. Export opportunities, not community resilience and stability. The vision statement makes it even clearer about what our future is. Chapter 3 of that statement is titled, Becoming an Energy Superpower. To get there, the Ontario government passed the Affordable Energy Act, misnamed. The bill has a number of troubling aspects of it, but perhaps one of the most troubling is Section 25, and it reads as follows. The prioritization of nuclear power generation to meet future increases in the demand for electricity. In a piece of legislation, the government has given priority and preference to nuclear power. In fact, right now, the Ford government is committed to the largest expansion of nuclear power in Canada's history. It is taking place in two ways, through refurbishments and through new builds. And refurbishments, currently there are 14 nuclear reactors that are being rebuilt in Ontario. And the new builds include the 4 small modular reactors at Darlington. By the way, they're not new. They've been around, that design, for about 20 years. They're not small, and they're not that modular. They are expensive, however. In terms of new builds, there's also large-scale reactors. Right now, there is a proposal to build 4 or 5 nuclear reactors in Kincardine on the lake, on the shores of Lake Huron. 4 to 5 new large-scale reactors. That'll be the first time reactors are built in Ontario in over 3 decades. And then, in mid-January, the government surprised just about everyone when it announced a new large-scale nuclear plant in the works for Port Hope. Here, they're talking about 8 to 10 new nuclear reactors. The size of that proposal is mind-boggling, but more mind-boggling still is the nuclear price tag in Ontario. Here's what that price tag looks like. The Darlington refurbishment, $12.8 billion. The Bruce refurbishment, $13 billion. The Pickering refurbishment, $13 billion. 4 SMRs at Darlington, $20 billion. 4 to 5 large-scale nuclear at Bruce, $75 billion. 8 to 10 reactors in Port Hope, $156 billion. The Deep Geological Waste Site, $26 billion. And in the last Ontario budget, they threw in another $3 billion to Atomic Energy and Control Limited. $318 billion is committed to nuclear power. Now, for most of us, that is a figure, that colossal amount of money we just can't even think about. What's $1 billion? Never mind $300 billion. A few quick comparisons. We could provide every dwelling in Ontario with a free $20,000 heat pump for $110 billion. We could then also give all of those dwellings a 20,000 rooftop solar system for another 110 billion. If you add those together, it is still less than the nuclear program that the Ford government has announced. You could replace half of the passenger vehicles in Ontario with a free electric vehicle for about 225 billion. You could provide every farm in Ontario with a 10 kilowatt wind turbine for only 5 billion. You could replace all of the school buses in Ontario with electric school buses for about 10 billion. You could replace transit fares in Toronto for the next 300 years. In 1999, Ontario Hydro buckled under the weight of its nuclear debt. At the time, its debt was 38 billion. Now Ford is committing over 300 billion to the nuclear industry. There is an energy transition happening all around the world. But in Ontario, the Ford government has chosen the costliest and the most climate-wrecking energy pathway: fossil gas and the nuclear industry. So that is some of the context for our opposition to the Portland gas plant and our ongoing commitment to promote clean, cheap, and safe renewable power. Thank you.
I know there was one